can get it.
just said, can you turn his podcast down?
Brad's Kitchen's not for a couple more weeks yet, right? But she's coming May 23rd, ladies. Mark your calendars, put in your cell phones, get off work, and be here at 5:30.
Do they have a website by any chance for ladies?
No, wait, isn't it?
What's that?
No, I don't think so. I think it's the 16th.
I'll be back for the third Tuesday.
The next week, yeah, that would be next week.
Not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday. I'll be in Texas.
Ruh-roh. You take that to Miss Lee Ann, and we'll come back up here. Okay, the third Tuesday would be the 16th. Okay, so this Tuesday, that's Tuesday week, ladies. Tuesday week at 5:30, right here. Tuesday week now. Everybody understand what Tuesday week means? Is that a Southern expression? It means a week from Tuesday. It's
Okay.
Tuesday week. You don't?
Yes.
Why's that? Now everybody's going to be here Tuesday.
No, not Tuesday. Tuesday week.
And then finish on here and minister to us. Helen, we're going to Gaskin.
Special speaker.
Yes, ma'am.
Would be two ladies? Two ladies.
Two ladies coming, Rhonda?
I thought it was just Annette, but on the flyer she did have another lady on there,
Cindy?
so I'm not sure. Is Cindy coming too?
Probably.
I think so.
All right, Sarah, go on.
All right. So, come this way, son. I don't know, sometime last week, Monday or Tuesday, me and Jacob were talking about Jesus. He had all these questions, and we read a book called Heaven is for Real. I think it's by the Fulton Burpo or something. Yeah, not necessarily totally right, but we read that book, and Jacob was like, "I want to go to heaven. Is heaven real?" And we were talking about heaven and how it's real, you know, and that that's where Jesus is now, but that one day He's going to come, return to the earth, and rule and reign here with us on earth, and that earth is going to be our forever home, and that, you know, we might get to visit heaven at some point, but we got to talking, and he just started cracking up, and he said that he wanted to be with Jesus forever, and that he believed that He rose from the dead, and that he wanted the Holy Spirit to come live inside of him. So he made his decision to follow Jesus, and we're going to just pray over him and pray over his decision. And I told him, you know, after we prayed that he was cracking up, and we told him that there was a party in heaven, and that all the angels were dancing, and that Jesus was dancing, and then we were dancing. Yeah, kind of like that. So, I asked Dad if we could just all pray over him today and over his
Everybody
decision.
stretch out your hands. Father, we thank You for Jacob. We thank You for his tender heart toward You, Lord God. Father, we thank You that he belongs to You. In the name of Jesus. In the name of Jesus, Father, continue to draw him. I thank You, Lord God, that everything that You've created him to do, to accomplish, and to be, Father, will be accomplished.
Yes.
Father, that he'll come to know You, Father, in a marvelous way. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Love you.
Sarah
There's
said,
no junior Holy Spirit.
Sarah said,
That's
you know,
right.
Daddy, is he too young? Is that really? I said, I'm not going to be the judge of that.
That's right.
I said, I'm not going to be the judge of that. I know it was real when I was 7.
That's right.
That's right.
And what is the word says, unless you believe as a little
As
child,
a little child, that's
for
right.
such is the kingdom of God.
That's right. Amen.
All right, where are we? Anything else needs to be announced before we eat?
Treasure hunt.
Treasure hunt.
Oh, treasure hunt.
I'm like so warm. My cheeks are like super red. So we met yesterday and went out treasure hunting, and we have an official treasure hunt record book now, so we can look over all of our treasure hunts and see what God's done and where He brings us. Who knows where we'll be a year from now, right? Or even next month. So it was me, Miss Peggy, Leanne, and Linda met yesterday, and we filled out our treasure maps and asked God who His treasure was, and went out in search of our clues. And the first place that our clues took us was to Walmart, to the toy section. or no, we went by the microwaves first, but then we went to the toy section, and in the toy section, we saw a lady walking with pink hair, and somebody had pink on their map, and it was the pinkest hair you'd ever seen. So we went and walked up to her and her husband. Her name was Brenda, and her husband was Jason, and we told her what we were doing and asked if there was anything she needed prayer for, and she said that her father Billy had been through throat cancer and then lung cancer, and that now he was going through liver cancer. And we were able to pray with them over that situation and bless them and declare healing in her father's body. And from there, our clues took us to the crickets in the fishing section.
You didn't tell me.
Yeah, so we had crickets in the Walmart. So we went to the crickets at the Walmart, and there at the counter was standing, it's very rare to see a Walmart employee not working, because they always, everybody would love to have attention from them to find something, right? Well, anyway, she was standing at the counter. Her name was Joan. And we had like a J day. Before we left, actually, Leanne was like, it's going to be a day of J names. And we had a lot of J names on our maps, but none of them ended up matching the J names, but we still had lots of J names. So we went and talked to Joan and asked her if she needed prayer for anything, and she asked for prayer for a friend who was sick. And we were able to pray and release healing and move on from there. And on the way out, we saw a young girl and her family climbing out of the car. She was wearing purple, and Miss Peggy had purple clothes on her map. So we walked up to them and introduced ourselves, and her name was Alexis, her father was Gabe, and her mom was Lisa, and asked them if they needed prayer for anything. And they didn't say anything in specific, but we just declared, just prayer and blessing over them anyways. And then from there, we stopped at the Bob's Factory outlet, and it had just closed and there was nobody there, but we took our time anyways and sat there and tried to wait and see if anybody was going to come out. Nobody did. And from there, which is important because if we hadn't stopped at Bob's Factory outlet, the next several treasures that we found in the places that we found them would not have been there. So from Bob's Factory outlet, we headed over to Tractor Supply, and from the highway, Leanne saw a table set up, and she said that's where we need to go. So we went over to the table, and it was Life Changers. There's a church out in Sevierville called Life Changers, and they have the same kingdom mindset, that we have in this house for the most part. And we got to talking to the ladies at the table, and they're actually going through a school of supernatural ministry from Bill Johnson and Chris Valentin at their church right now. So it was just a fun encounter. And we had Tractor Supply. They both had really yellow blonde hair, and we had yellow hair on our treasure maps. And then one of the ladies was wearing a really green hat, and we had green on our treasure map. So their names were Jessica and Angela, and Jessica asked for prayer for her mom, Linda, and Angela asked for prayer for her son, who was going through a court case. So we were able to pray over their situations and bless them and just ask for increase in them, and while they're going through school. It's always fun to run into somebody, especially a believer who has a kingdom mindset. That's even more fun. So we had fun blessing them. And we there was a lady wearing cowboy boots with red hair, and we had cowboy boots and red hair on our treasure map. She was walking in, but we asked them if they needed prayer for anything, and they didn't want prayer, so we just blessed them and went on our way. Dusted off our feet and went over to Badcock Furniture. And remember I said we had stopped at Bob's Factory outlet, and then we were there talking to these ladies, and Leanne had somebody in mind at Badcock Furniture. And as we walked up to the door, this lady was walking to the door to leave work because she works there. So it was just like perfect timing, and God lined it up, and we were able to pray with her and bless her and her sons. And then from there, we went to, next page, sorry guys. We went to the next page. Then we went to Walgreens, which is also important for timing. We walked around Walgreens and nothing really seemed to happen, and we felt peace to go, so we left Walgreens and went over to Dollar General Market. And we had nose ring, boots, and green again. But we were walking through the Dollar General Market, and in the back of the store there was young lady that had a nose ring, and her daughter Savannah was with her in boots. And I think she had
They both had
green
boots.
contact eyes that are removable or something. But we got to talking to her and told her what we were doing, and she asked for prayer over her her daughter's father who was in jail, and we got to pray over that situation and the little girl and bless them. It was a nice thing. It was a fun encounter. And then from there, as we were leaving Dollar General Market, somebody was walking into Dollar General Market, which we would not have run into if we hadn't have walked around Walgreens at the time that we did, or if we hadn't have stopped at Bob's Factory Outlet at the time we did, or if we hadn't wrapped it up with other people at the time we did. So it's just, God just lines up everything. But as we were walking out, we saw a service dog, a little tiny poodle-like service dog, and this lady's buggy, and we stopped and started talking to her about what the service dog was for, and it was for her daughter. It was for the 23-year-old daughter, right? Okay. It was for some PTSD for the 23-year-old daughter. We were talking to them, and she said that she had lived a life of, like a homosexual lifestyle, and that she was just starting to come out of it.
She
and
is out of it.
Yeah, she is out of it. So she wanted prayer over her daughter and over her daughter's future, and we got to declare identity over her and pray with her mother about that. And her sister, Erica, was there also. And she was going on a trip to Charleston, so we were able to bless her on her trip, and that is the treasure hunting. I felt like that was a lot of words. It's like my word count for the whole week. You're lucky.
Yes, you are.
Lord God, we thank you, Father, for what you have done, and we ask you, Father, for divine encounters. Father, for these that go out treasure hunting, Father, for divine encounters. Father, we ask you, Lord God, that you would confirm your word with signs and wonders. In the name of your holy child, Jesus. Father, not just for the treasure hunters, but give us all divine encounters each and every day. In Jesus' name we thank you for it, and the church said. Amen. Well, you ready to eat? Well, we got to receive the offering first, don't we? I feel it. I'm gonna eat a bunch. I just am. Is Batman here today? You know what? I used to want to be Batman when I grew up. I used to tell
I want to be a ballerina.
I used to tell my children, when I had children, I used to tell them, when I grow up, I want to be Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, and a ballerina.
I only remember the ballerina.
Well, I don't want to be Batman anymore, or Superman, or Spider-Man, or ballerina. I've finally found my persona. I've found my superhero persona. Nap Man. Yes, Nap Man. I have the most incredible superpower of all. You know, I mean, Superman can help save somebody, or Batman can catch the bad guys, and Spider-Man can swing through the city and wrap somebody in the net, but that's also localized. I've got a far better superpower. I just take a nap and the whole world becomes a better place. I told Cindy I needed some stretchy pants and a cake, but she hadn't made me one yet. I don't know. Feel a nap coming on. Let's receive our tithes and offerings. Father, we thank you for your goodness. We worship you now. Father, be first in every area of our life. In Jesus' name, amen. The altar. You ready to rumble?
Si, senor.
Open your Bibles this morning to Hebrews chapter 9.
Jesus is better.
Jesus is better. You know, if we were to sum up the theme of the book of Hebrews, it'd be real simple. Be what Sarah just said.
He's
Jesus
better.
is better. Period, end of story. The writer of Hebrews teaches us that Jesus is better than the Old Testament prophets. They were servants, but now God speaks through His Son. He teaches us that Jesus is better than the angels. After all, He created them. Jesus is better than Moses. Moses was a faithful steward of God's house, but Jesus is the builder of the house. Jesus is better than Aaron. The Levitical priests always had their priesthood come to an end. They would die. And when they died, they weren't priests anymore. But Jesus is a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. He has an eternal priesthood. The ministry of Jesus is better than the ministry of the law. The ministry of the new covenant that Jesus mediates is better than the ministry of the old covenant. It does so much more. Jesus is better than the sacrifices offered under the law. The theme of Hebrews, period, end of story, is Jesus is better. I want to go to Hebrews chapter 9 for our focus today and look at these 5 verses starting in, or maybe it's 5 verses starting in verse 19. Let's just read here today. Hebrews 9:19. For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and of goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book and all the people, saying, This is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined unto you. Moreover, he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. It was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. We see that God commanded Moses to construct the tabernacle of the wilderness, and once Moses followed the instructions, or Moses and the people followed the instructions and they had built it, that tabernacle needed to be purified. Why? Well, it was built by a defiled people in a defiled world from defiled material. So Moses sacrificed calves and goats, mixed their blood with water, took a stick that was hyssop wood, put some red wool on the end of it, dipped it in that mixture, and then he sprinkled the book of the covenant. He sprinkled all the people. He sprinkled the tabernacle. He sprinkled all the vessels that were going to be used for ministry in the tabernacle. Why? To purify. That's easy enough, and it really makes sense. Verse 9:23 there tells us it was necessary that the patterns of the things in the heavens should be purified with blood, and they were. Here's what I want to get at today. Verse 23 goes on to say this. It doesn't just say it was necessary that the patterns of things in heaven should be purified with that blood. It goes on to say, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. Now, look, the writer's arguing that the real tabernacle, the heavenly tabernacle, which the tabernacle in the wilderness was patterned after, had to be purified with better blood than the blood of cows and goats that was mixed with water. Okay. I see his argument, or here's what he's saying, but here's my question. Here's the question that blew up in me, that I wanted to answer. Why would the true tabernacle, the heavenly tabernacle, which the tabernacle in the wilderness was patterned after, need to be purified? After all, it's the real tabernacle in heaven, right? Why would something that's heavenly need to be purified? Or is that thinking wrong? is the heavenly tabernacle that Moses was shown the pattern to. If it's heavenly, why would it need to be purified? I want to answer that today. I want to look at three things in order to answer that question. First, I want to talk about where is heaven? Where is heaven? If the tabernacle of the wilderness was patterned after the heavenly tabernacle, if the tabernacle of the wilderness was patterned after the heavenly tabernacle, we need to be sure we understand where heaven is. Number two, we need to look at what the purpose of the tabernacle of the wilderness was. We're going to look at those two things, and the answers to those two questions ought to lead us to the answer to the third question, which is, what is the real heavenly tabernacle and why did it need to be purified? So, here we go. Turn in your Bibles. You can hold your place in Hebrews chapter 19. Hebrews chapter 9. Turn in your Bibles to Isaiah chapter 66. Where is heaven? Where is heaven? What is heaven? Isaiah 66:1. I believe that's the last chapter of Isaiah, if I'm not mistaken. All right, I'm fixing to mess with you. You ready to be messed with? I've been getting messed with. This was running all over the place inside of me last week while you were teaching. I want to say, all right, when Joel's done, it's my turn. You did a good job, by the way. I chewed on that all the week long. Yes. Yes. Hallelujah. We need to let it flow. Yeah, I was telling somebody this morning, they were telling me they never thought about how if they don't, let the Spirit of God and the things of God flow out of them, they just become a sour dam. And I said, yeah, I heard a guy put it this way. One time he had a sermon he preached called Sit, Soak, and Sour. And he said most believers were like sponges. And they get dipped in water. And then they just sit there full of water so they sour because they never get squeezed out. And that's, you know effectively what Joe was talking about last week. He did a good job. Where is heaven? Isaiah 66:1. Read with me verse 1. Thus saith the Lord, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that ye built unto me, and where is the place of my rest? I want you to notice that Isaiah says heaven is God's throne. Go to Matthew chapter 5. Isaiah said heaven is God's throne. Go to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, verse 34. Real simple. Jesus said, but I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne. Isaiah said heaven is God's throne. Jesus said heaven is God's throne. Here's where we think in a very common error. Here's where we embrace a very common error in our day-to-day thinking. We need to grow beyond this place. The error is we think God's throne is in heaven. I want to tell you this morning, when we're talking about where is heaven, God's throne is not in heaven. Rather, heaven is God's throne. Didn't you just read it in Isaiah? Didn't Jesus just say it? Huh? Yeah, that's exactly right. There is not a place where God the Father can sit down and all of Him be there. You don't have to turn there, but I'll quote from you. And there's so many scriptures after this case. I'll quote if you want to make a note, 2 Chronicles 2:6. But who is able to build him a house, seeing the heaven and the heaven of heavens can't contain him? Who am I then that I should build him a house, save only to burn sacrifice before him? Heaven, the heaven of heavens, can't contain the Father. I'm going to say it again. God's throne is not in heaven. Heaven is God's throne. He's in. What I want to show you this morning is He's enthroned upon heaven. So we could say heaven is where God is enthroned. God is enthroned upon heaven. Now, it's not like revelation, but it's clarification of our thought processes. Deuteronomy 10:14. Deuteronomy 10:14. Talking about where is heaven. Deuteronomy 10:14. Got it?
Got it.
If you got it, say I got it.
Got it.
Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens is the Lord's thy God. The earth also with all that therein is. Heaven belongs to God. Nehemiah 9:6. You don't need to turn there, just listen. That's just to reinforce. This is Nehemiah 9:6. Even thou art Lord alone. Thou hast made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their host, the earth and all things that are therein, the seas and all that is therein, and thou preservest them all, and the host of heaven worshipeth thee. Do the angels, do the souls of men in heaven worship Him? Yes. Heaven belongs to God. Why? He created it.
Right.
Or better yet, He is the one who produced it, and He is the one who is producing it. Now, I want to be clear. Number one, I said, heaven is where God is enthroned. God is enthroned upon heaven. God's throne is not in heaven. Heaven is God's throne. Number two, heaven is produced by and cannot exist apart from God. Heaven is produced by and cannot exist apart from God. All right. We'll look at one more thing, one more point about heaven here. 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 30. I want you to look at this with me. Turn to 2 Chronicles 6:30.
What did you say again?
2 Chronicles 6:30. Got it? All right. It reads, then hear thou, this is a prayer of Solomon, then hear thou from heaven thy dwelling place, and forgive and render unto every man according unto all his ways, whose heart thou knowest. Solomon prayed to the Lord God, and he said, when someone prays toward the temple, hear from heaven, which is your dwelling place. That word dwell in the Hebrew there is Yashab, Yashab, spelled Y-A-S-H-A-B. Here's what it means: to sit down, to remain, to settle, to marry, habitation. Those are all definitions that can be applied to the word Yashab. So, not only is God enthroned upon heaven, heaven is produced by and cannot exist apart from Him, and heaven is the place that God inhabits and remains in. I've given you three things about this where is heaven issue so far. Heaven is where God is enthroned. Heaven is produced by and does not exist apart from God. Heaven is the place God inhabits and remains in. Now I want to add one more thing to this, and then I'll be done with this little conversation. We'll move on. I want to add one more thing for clarification to this list. Jesus said in Matthew 6:10, you don't need to turn there. He said, when you pray, pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. He said, you need to pray that God's will be done here just like it is in heaven. In other words, Jesus told the disciples, what you should desire is God's will. Right? Amongst other things. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Okay, so that thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Let's sum it up. Heaven is a place where God's will is willingly done. The holy angels aren't mad about it. They're not doing it reluctantly. It's what they've chosen. Heaven is a place where God's will is willingly done. In praying for the kingdom of heaven to come, Jesus said we should willingly pray that God's will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Only where God's will is willingly done does heaven exist.
That's good.
That's right.
Only where God's will is willingly done does heaven exist. Let me sum it up. I'll come back to that in just a second. Heaven is a place inhabited by God because those in that place are willingly submitted to Him. He inhabits it because the ones there are willingly submitted to Him, and in doing so they have enthroned Him.
That's right.
It's clear in the Word that in heaven the souls of men and the souls of men and angels willingly give God praise and honor. See, this is why even though God is omnipresent, that means He's everywhere. Everywhere is not heaven.
No.
That's good. That's good.
Because everything and everyone everywhere is not willingly submitted to His will. Therefore, He is not enthroned, and heaven cannot be produced.
That's true. Amen.
Come on, get out of Sunday school and let's go now.
That's good. That's good.
He's obviously omnipresent. He holds everything together by the power of His Word.
That's right. He does.
If He sent His Word to accomplish a purpose, He knows whether or not it's accomplishing the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If something tries to resist it, it's obvious to Him.
That's right.
That's good.
Are you saying that heaven like we think about it, does not exist. No, no, no. Jesus is there. The holy angels are there. My mama's there. What I am saying is, quote unquote, heaven is not the only place that heaven exists.
It's in the earth. Yes, sir.
God created the heavens and the earth, and He made the Garden of Eden, and He made a garden, and He stuck Adam and Eve there. When God did that, was the earth heaven? No. Was heaven in the earth? Yeah.
Yes, amen. Was.
It was in Adam and Eve. They were willingly submitted to God's will. Therefore, they had enthroned Him. And heaven permeated that place. Hey, heaven's here again on earth. It showed up when Jesus got here. He brought it back. And the church will subdue the earth with the kingdom of heaven. So, I want to leave you with that. I mean, there's no end to this, but I want to leave you with that framework this morning to answer the question, where is heaven? I'm going to give you those things again. It's where God's enthroned. Heaven cannot exist apart from God. God's presence. Heaven is the place God inhabits and remains. Why? Because He's enthroned there, because His will is willingly done. Is that okay so far? What was the purpose now of the tabernacle in the wilderness? What was the purpose of the tabernacle in the wilderness? Was it a place that they built for God to be worshipped? That's probably what we think in general. It was a place that God had them build so He could be worshipped. Well, what's the Word say about that? Turn to Exodus chapter 25. Exodus chapter 25.